So, Ari Aster made a fucking Western. Yes, the man who brought you Hereditary, Midsummer, Beau was Afraid. This man is insane. Look at this poster. Right off the bat, we're hit with some interesting imagery. And I'm not gonna lie, this poster got me. A herd of buffalo falling off of a cliff. And honestly, that's the movie. Being so rooted in your convictions that you're blind or unwilling even to notice the path that you're on. Self-destruction. Fair warning, this movie is a dissection, a socio-political commentary on the pandemic. So if you don't think it was real, I don't know, you shouldn't watch this. Eddington felt exactly what it felt like to be active during the pandemic. Being torn and pulled in so many different directions, and depending on your sphere of ideology you were in during the pandemic, your viewing experience might reflect that. But I have to give props. Crafting a story about a moment in history that we're still recovering from, we're still seeing effects from, is bold and also hard to do. I can't even begin to fathom how one would attempt to make this type of film. But no matter your personal feelings about it, I think most of us can agree that America completely mishandled that situation. So to use one of the most beloved storytelling mediums in America, the Western, is kind of ironic, but also very fitting. This film had a feeling of emptiness, much like a Western ghost town, much like the empty streets of large cities. There were standoffs, there were shootouts. This is a modern day Western. And I don't know if you've seen a Western from back in the day, but if you're expecting a fast-paced, thrilling experience that will keep you on the edge of your seat, this isn't that. This movie is somewhat of a crawl, a look into the abyss that is existential dread. And oddly enough, it works well because it awkwardly builds on itself in a slow burn fashion that parallels the absurdity and backwards nature of the pandemic. What this movie is trying to do won't resonate with everybody. And that kind of makes me sad because I think there are some really important themes, but this commentary is extremely sensitive and polarizing. This movie tries to touch on all kinds of nuance, and not everybody is comfortable with nuance, not everybody can comprehend nuance. And I think a lot of people will simply see this movie as a mess. But that's the ironic poetry, because the pandemic in America was a mess. The restrictions, the reliability of data and information, the lies, the smear campaigns, the racial tension. I'm black, by the way. It was hysteria. And in theory, this might sound like a terrible idea, especially since we have shit like this.
2020 does not exist anymore. The virus changed the world, and communism is all over the place. A global world language developed. Meetings are illegal. Traveling is illegal. And Christianity is illegal.
I can do the most important thing of my life, to believe.
If you haven't seen this movie, I am going to be talking about spoilers because I have to. We're trying to get deep, and I won't shut the fuck up. So, set during the summer in Eddington, New Mexico, this movie opens with a man who's homeless. He's talking to himself. He seems lost in his own mind, and this could be a representation of the illness we all fall into while holding so tightly to our own ideologies. He's also holding on to a dead bird for a majority of the movie, perhaps symbolizing what his perspectives, his mind once were, once alive, mobile, active, and revolving. Remember this, being a rural town, it makes sense to an extent why Joe, the sheriff and main character, is skeptical about the mask mandates and COVID-19 as a whole. Joe is losing his shit. Not only is he losing his hold over the town due to the newly mandated COVID protocols, but he's losing his own sense of freedom and control in his life. His wife, who's troubled for reasons we'll get into later, is distant, putting a strain on the relationship. His mother-in-law, oh my god, that he lives with is continually parroting COVID conspiracies and basically just talking shit to him and antagonizing him the whole movie. His department has had staffing issues for various reasons, including abuse of power and lack of accountability, and he's also at odds with the town's mayor, Ted Garcia, who's working with the governor and trying to enforce these mandates without Joe's input whatsoever. Change is uncomfortable, so a series of changes in a town that Joe is supposed to have jurisdiction over is disruptive to his status quo, to say the least. And on top of all of that, this dude has asthma. As the movie plays out, we see Joe being squeezed tightly, constricted, feeling challenged and cornered on every front. And now he has to wear a mask. We watch as control slowly slips from his fingertips, and in his attempts to grasp something, anything, he lashes out and makes numerous impulsive decisions. He's trapped in this cycle, loss of control, which leads to fear, which leads to impulsive decisions, which don't normally go well, which lead to more loss of control. And this parallels a lot of people whose lives were basically turned upside down. But Joe isn't the only character worth noting. Ted Garcia, the mayor, is shown to have tension with Joe. His policies are under fire for increasing taxes and consuming resources that the county doesn't have, and allowing big corporate AI to strong-arm its way into town, which also neighbors indigenous land, by the way. He shows us that behind closed doors, he's willing to forego the very mandates he outwardly and enthusiastically supports. He's a disingenuous illusion of order, which a lot of people believe is the case with our figures of authority. There's this kid, Brian, who buys into political activism to subside his feelings of loneliness, basically to get with a girl, cornball. He parrots liberal activist talking points without having immersed himself in any struggle or having any proximity to blackness. There are like 4 black people in this town, and he doesn't talk to a single one of them, but he still gets accepted under the wing of the group he's seeking attention from. And as he grows more and more convicted in this mindset, it just feels hollow because the source is ingenuine, rooted in acceptance and not equity. We also have Eric, a young person of color whose convictions in the same issues feel more natural due to his background and his father being closer to politics. Sarah, who Brian was first trying to impress, who becomes the love interest in this triangle of young people. The white ally means well, but is tiring, to say the least. She knows every buzzword in the book, but is extremely new to activism and liberation, and she really captures that young, slightly misguided energy. Gus and Mike, both cops, one white, one black. Gus seems unextraordinary at first, but soon reveals his frustrations, generalizations, and lack of regard for nuance. Mike, one of the only black people in the movie, may or may not be a Winter Soldier and may or may not have dated a minor. His character shows some of the complexity of blackness in America, especially during Black Lives Matter, while also being a cop. And let me just say, I appreciated how they handled this character. He wasn't corny or overly righteous. They weren't using him as some weird plot device to garner sympathy for police. His reactions actually showed the variability that happens in real time when dealing with black grief. He wasn't yelling or constantly lashing out. He was quiet and processing most of the time, even when everyone else was expecting him to react immediately. Just something that was done very well, considering that this movie is jam-packed full of shit, and the director isn't black. It just seemed like it was handled with care. We have Louise, who's Joe's wife. It's alluded to that Louise was sexually abused by her father. This, unfortunately, affected her mentally and emotionally, even stunting her growth as a mature adult. This is evidenced by her fixation on creating dolls that are dark in nature and appearance, and her attraction to older authority figures like Joe, the sheriff, and Vernon, the cult-like leader, father figures that she never got. There are also hints that her mother, Dawn, also received some abuse as well, which might explain her fixation on conspiracies. And then we have Vernon, the cult-like leader who thrived during the pandemic, spreading all types of bullshit. He seems to represent the shift in influence, from once credible outlets of authority to shaky vibes-based influencers who garnered massive views across all platforms during the pandemic. Places for those who were silenced and confused and frustrated to find belonging. Basically, the internet. And then we have a pretty dope indigenous character known as Officer Jimenez, aka Officer Butterfly Jimenez, who shows how the innocent and the well-intentioned and the confused can get swept up in the storm and ultimately harmed. There are a lot of characters in this movie, and people usually say that a lot of characters makes the movie hard to follow or takes away from each character's role. But this movie isn't about the characters' singular actions. It's about how their bubbles collide with one another. Ari Aster is an amazing director. He's super good at taking the aspects that these characters represent and creating the most fleshed out, intensified versions of them. And we still have more characters. This might seem overwhelming, but this amount of characters is necessary to show the nuance it takes to paint this whole picture honestly. If you're rooting for or trying to find comfort in a single character, you're going to have a hard time. There is no good or bad guy. This movie does not allow you to get comfortable on any side. This movie is a mess, and that's what makes it work. It does not hold your hand. It actually points and laughs in your face and spits on you. And the characters, despite them being so many, was an intentional device. But some people won't fuck with that because there's just so much going on. There's so much trauma in this movie. I do recommend that you take your time, especially if you're someone that has personal traumas that relate to this film. If you had a hard time during the pandemic, please keep this in mind. You're going to see some things that will be heavy. And if you're anything like me, you might empathize with some of these characters and you will probably feel similar to how you felt in 2020. This is an Ari Aster film, and there's intergenerational trauma in all of his movies, especially this one. Trauma often holds us, but not in a comforting way. It's a grip that stops us from moving forward. A pool we can escape, but often only with help and time. The film shows us different ways that trauma is not only experienced, but also manipulated and weaponized. But that's Ari Aster's thing, so I don't really have any complaints there. It's just heavy, heavy shit. We see how phones play an important role, reinforcing our ideologies and beliefs. They even put the black square from the Black Lives Matter movement in this movie. I'm still mad that y'all fucked that up, but it's in the movie. Everything is covered. We hear programming, radio, news station broadcasts from both extreme sides of the political spectrum throughout the movie. These were thoughtful touches, and they kind of keep you on your toes. Again, this movie does not let you rest. And then Ari Aster does The Thing. So if you're unfamiliar with this director, he's known for tone shifts. He usually grounds us with the first 2/3 of the movie with realism, and then he just flips the switch, and this is the most realistically presented Ari Aster film I think that we've gotten. This fictional town feels real. So the switch, in this case, was absolutely jarring, but also reminiscent of the later stages of the pandemic because shit got crazy. There were actual horrors that a lot of people experienced. And somehow this dude was able to change this political socio-commentary into the average American propaganda eater's police officer's worst nightmare, an Antifa horror story. Don't ask me how it worked, but it did. The concept of Antifa is in this movie, and it's depicted as this monstrous projection, a heavily funded shadow government entity setting the board and steering conflicts behind the scenes, terrorist-like, and they show up and they terrorize Joe. Basically, pretty much everything that Fox News was saying. If you know what Antifa means, then you know what the fuck was really going on. But Ari making this belief part of his surreal twist is so fucking funny, but it was super intense. And seeing this perspective come to life was definitely noteworthy. If you have the stomach for this movie, this part alone is worth the watch. And again, this movie doesn't give a fuck about you. There are no heroes, there are no villains to this story. It's just a collection of individuals doing what humans do best, and that is emphasizing our differences. There is no happy ending. This movie parallels real life, and we don't see an outcome that we probably like to see because we didn't see one in real life. Big tech wins. It was shown in the opening shot and it's shown in the ending shot. The big AI company was built and they put the fucking indigenous man on the building that is disrupting the land that he was protecting. We see the grim realities much like in real life. Intergenerational trauma continues. Resentment broods. Conspiracy evolves. Socio-political division, tension, and unease are still present more than ever. We're still left with a mess, just a different one. Our main character, John, who is now the mayor, is unable to use his whole body's functionality due to his run-in with Antifa. He can't walk, he can't move his limbs, he can't talk. He's the mayor, but a former shell of himself, much like the bird in the beginning of the movie who was once alive, had perspectives, and was mobile and was revolving. Dawn, his mother-in-law, the COVID conspiracy woman, is now speaking for him, which speaks to the criticisms of our current leaders who often don't do shit when they're needed, who often are called puppets on a string. Like, God, like what the fuck was this? I can't recommend this movie to everybody. If you had a very hard time during the pandemic, if you are dealing with some heavy traumas, if you have certain political views, this movie might piss you off. It will piss you off at certain times. It will also surprise you, but it's largely going to upset you in some way. And I think that's the point. But it's also unique as it really gives a lot of insight and depth and presents this time period in a really realistic and honest way. And you might learn something about yourself or just some of these other viewpoints. I definitely was interested and invested the whole time, and I was able to have some really, really dope discussions afterwards. So what do you guys think? Are you planning on seeing it? If not, why? If so, if you feel like talking about some of your experiences during that time, feel free to share. But we're not going to do any of that hate shit. This was a rough time for everybody, so just be supportive. Thanks.